How's it going, guys? My name is Tavarish, and this is the Sunday show where I tell you things that are on my mind and answer a few of your questions. So sit back, relax. This should be fun. So before we start off, I just want to let you guys know that I'm still selling shirts in my Teespring store, and everything for the next 2 months is going to go directly to hurricane relief. Irma, Harvey, and Maria have devastated both the U.S. and the Caribbean, and I think it's time for us to give back. I'd like to give back, so all the profits from my shirts. Actually, this isn't one of my shirts, even though it is pretty cool. Will sent me this shirt. But my shirts are actually in the laundry right now. I've been wrenching so hard every day. But all my shirts can be found in my Teespring store in the link below, and all the profits are going to go to people that actually need the money rather than me that all I do is sort of tinker on cars. So let's help out some really good people and people that really need our help. Check that out. Now, the focus of today's video is cars that will skyrocket in value, probably. I say probably because I don't have a crystal ball, but I can know, I can have an idea of what the market will bear later on just by what I've seen so far. So here's some cars that I think you'll make money on if you buy them right now. The first car is a Aston Martin V12 Vantage manual. Now, Aston Martin is one of those brands that never actually caught on to collector car markets unless you're talking about stuff like the DB5, which was made popular by James Bond. But even then, they weren't that good of an automobile. I mean, they had, it was basically not as good as an E-Type. It didn't look as good. But, you know, and then later on in the 70s and 80s, they had stuff like the Legenda, which was, you know, only a mother could love that face. Later on, they had really, really good cars. Like the late 90s, the DB7 was great. And then the Vantage and the Vanquish. And also the DB9. The DB9 was kind of sort of the iconic, quintessential Aston Martin. But I think that the one that is actually going to appreciate is their sports car with all the power that they can muster. It's that big engine, small car formula that make the likes of Shelby Cobra really popular. So the V12 Vantage doesn't come with a 4.3 liter V8, obviously, because it's called a V12 Vantage. It has a 6.0 liter or 5.9, depending on what side of the world you're on, V12, and that comes from the DBS. And that is 510 horsepower, and it sounds amazing. And in that car, in that small chassis, in that very, very taut, very finely tuned chassis, that thing is an animal. So they recently released a 7-speed manual, and I believe you could get a 6-speed manual before then, but I'm not quite sure. I know that they had the automated manual, which was just complete garbage. But and then they had a 7-speed automated manual, which was also complete garbage. So those cars, I think, will appreciate in value just because it is the last Aston Martin manual you can buy. There will be no more, unless they start making DB11s with manual, which I don't think they will. But I don't actually know what they're going to do in the future. But I know that all the other major exotic car manufacturers, they have shied away from doing manuals. Like Ferrari, no manuals. Lamborghini, no manuals. Jaguar, I don't think has any manuals, or maybe they will, I don't know. But Aston Martin, I don't think they have too many manuals, especially not the really taut sports convertibles. Maybe they have something for the low end. So that is something to get. Right now, I think you can find a V12 Vantage for around 150 grand with the manual, and it is a lot of money. But I think that you'll make that money up later on. If let's say you wait 10 years, those cars will be in very high demand. At least I think so. And I mean, it's an Aston Martin. You can, even if the thing breaks down and leaks coolant all over the place, you can clean up the coolant and just stare at it in your garage. So that's another added bonus. The car is just beautiful. The next car is a E46 M3 BMW. So I used to have one of these cars, and it's actually not a bad car at all. A few things I don't like about the car is that the engine isn't as torquey as I'd like it to be. The ride is a little rough, and the interior quality ain't that great. But it is an M car, and it was a standard benchmark for performance cars at the time. Actually, for a long time ahead of that, because it had a 3.2 liter naturally aspirated inline six that made 333 horsepower. That's a lot of power. It revved out pretty highly. It revved to, I believe, 7,000 in that area, 7,500, and with some mods you can get it up to and including 8 grand. Even though I'm not sure the valves would really like that too much. But the reason I think that this car is going to go up in value is just because they didn't really make that many of them. And the ones you want are obviously the hardtop, non-convertible manuals. And the fact that you can actually convert the SMGs to the manuals with about $1,500 worth of parts, because the SMG and the manual, they're exactly the same transmission, but the bell housing is different, and obviously the shifter, you have to take out the shifter and the pedal box, and that's basically it. You have yourself an E46 manual. I think that's going to make it a lot more accessible to a lot of people, especially overseas, and people that don't want to deal with the SMG problems. Right now, you can find them pretty cheaply. I mean, you can find a basket case for around 6 to 8 grand, but a really nice one. They were about 15 grand, but they're going up into the high teens, maybe 20s for a really taken care of example. So this is a car to watch out for, especially if you're into appreciating values for those type of cars. Now there is a caveat. I don't think it's going to be like the E30 M3 where it goes from, oh, this is an old rusty piece of crap and I want 5 grand for it to 50 grand overnight. But I think there is going to be like a steady climb because it has hit the bottom of its depreciation curve and it's been there for a little while. And I bought mine a few years ago and I sold it within a few months, but I bought it for 7 grand and it was a real pile of crap. So I assume that you can probably buy something like that now, maybe fix it up and then just wait and get paid to wait. You're not going to get paid a lot. I don't think it's going to be, a crazy increase, but I do think that you'll get your money out of it. But at the end of the day, it is a BMW and it is an M car and it has independent throttle bodies and it has some really cool racing technology in it. So yeah, why not get it? Next car is a Porsche 997.1 Turbo. Now these are actually going down slightly, but they're holding their value. I think they're right about plateauing on their value scale. Now, the 997.1 Turbo is like the 2007 Porsche 911 Turbo, and those you should get with manual because they had an automatic option, which was okay, but it definitely wasn't the driving experience that a manual is, or the PDK later on, but the PDKs are still in the $70,000 to $90,000 range, and those are coming down slightly as well, but I think the 997.1, they had the PASM system that, I don't know what that stands for, but it was the kind of body control and it was the stability control that is really good on that car. And that differentiates itself from the 996 Turbo, which is good in its own right. I know Doug DeMuro really likes the 996 Turbo and he thinks that that's one of the best bargains in the performance car market. But I think the 997 is twice as much car for not twice the amount of money. So the 997 looks way better. It looks very contemporary. If people didn't know that a new 911 was out and you told them that this was a new 911, they'd think that it was a new 911. It is really good looking. The interior is very smart looking. You can update the look of the interior. You can put like aftermarket radios that don't that look like they belong in the car. The car is very usable. You can park it anywhere. Anybody can drive it. It doesn't kick your butt like the turbo 911s of the 80s and early 90s, but it is a very fun car to drive. And it is one of the fastest cars that I think you can buy for the money. And I know it has like 400 something horsepower, and that doesn't really sound like a lot, but that power is delivered in such a way that other cars just can't keep up because the engine is in the rear and it's also all-wheel drive. So basically, if you want to launch this thing, you want to rev it basically at a red line and drop the clutch. Well, you'll fry the clutch, but if you hook up, then this thing can get from 0 to 60 in faster than any Ferrari of today. Well, not any Ferrari, but basically just as fast as a Ferrari. And I believe the PDK models that came afterwards, it was like 0 to 60 in something like 2.7 seconds, which is Veyron territory. So these cars you can buy for around 50 to 60 grand. And I think they're a really good value, especially because that is used Aston Martin Vantage money. If you want to get like a Vantage 4.7, which has around 400 horsepower, these start at that amount of money, but you can then modify them into being 500, 600, 700 horsepower monsters without too much work, even though the parts are kind of crazy expensive. Even if you wanted to keep it stock, it's a very, very good car for the money. But if you wanted to have it as an investment car, then if you keep the miles relatively low, or make sure that if you do drive it a lot like it should be driven, I'm a fan of driving cars like they should, then make sure that you have the documentation that that has been taken care of. They also didn't have the IMS bearing issue that the 997 and 996 had, the naturally aspirated versions, by the way. So the engine is very, very bulletproof, but I digress. If you are driving it, then make sure you have all the receipts and all that stuff just to make the next owner feel good about buying this car, because these cars are made to be ragged on, and a car that has been a 997 turbo that has been driven to and from church by an old lady just isn't realistic. So just make sure that you convince the next person that's buying the car that you didn't really abuse it like the next owner thinks you did. So the next car is a Lamborghini Gallardo with a manual stick shift. These cars are really, really good, and the early versions had a very bad single clutch automated manual. They call it an E-gear, and E-gear, I don't know why they call it an E-gear. It sounds like it's bad. It sounds like it's gonna break. But they also had a 6-speed manual version, which was way better. So if you're familiar with YouTube, then one YouTuber vlogger, the Stradman, he actually has a Lamborghini Gallardo, an early model with a manual, and that thing sounds great, and it's a good driving car, and it's basically it's definitely a modern classic, even though Lamborghini made a lot of Gallardos. It's by far their best-selling car. So here's a fun fact. From Lamborghini's inception, all the cars they made, every single car, half of them have been Gallardos. That's how much they've made. So I think they've made more Gallardos than there are Toyota Supras and Acura NSXs, so that gives you an idea of how many Lamborghini made of those cars. But the early ones, the early models, the 6 speeds, they're relatively attainable if you're looking for something that is around the $100,000 mark, which is a lot of money, but if you're looking for something that will appreciate, that is one car I'd consider. You'd probably get one that needs a little bit of work, maybe a little higher mileage, for 80 to 90. And then make sure the work is done, and then you'll be at that $100,000 mark. And they are pretty reliable. They actually aren't that bad to maintain, from what I've heard. I've never actually owned one, but it is that driving experience that people are chasing. And even though that car doesn't have the scissor doors, it still says Lamborghini on the back, still has an amazing exhaust tone, and it still comes in really cool colors like Ithaca green and yellow and orange and all that really wild, crazy stuff. So I'd say that car is eligible for a good return on your money if you kept it around for 5 or 10 years. Didn't put too many miles on it. I mean, obviously you can go around and bomb the canyons or go on a spirited run every now and again. But if you want to hold on to that value, Lamborghini owners are very, very fickle about their mileage. So I don't think people would want to buy a 100,000 mile Lamborghini Gallardo, even though I would. I definitely would. So maybe I wouldn't overpay for it. I would basically lowball you, but I would still like the story nonetheless. And the last car I'm not even sure about, but I'm going to include it anyway just because I have seen these cars go up in value, and that is a Mitsubishi 3000 GT VR4. Now, I've had 2 of these cars. One was very nice and one was not so nice. So I had one on either side of the spectrum of when they were made. One of my 3000 GT VR4s was the first year, the 1991 VR4 with the 5-speed, and I think the engine was it didn't have 320 horsepower. I think it had 300 horsepower back then. But it was the same 6072 twin turbo, all-wheel drive, manual 5-speed with all-wheel steering, active aero. So it had active underbody spoiler and active spoiler in the back. And it was like 3,800 pounds. It weighed a lot and didn't really run right. I got the car for like $1,000 or $1,400 or whatever. And it was just a complete basket case and needed work everywhere. But I got the car running enough that I sold it to another guy that got it running more. His name is Jersaw, and he actually made a bunch of videos on it, which is kind of cool. But that car I didn't really like because it needed too much work, and I was also moving to Florida at the time. But the other car that I had was just I miss it every day. I sort of want to buy it back. It's my 99 3000 GT VR4. So this is the swan song of this car. And it's been, basically this is the 9th year of production. and it was the last year, and they only made 200 and I believe 74 of these cars. They were imported into the U.S. It is beautiful. I love the way the car looks. It is the epitome of Japanese styling in the late 90s. It was like this crazy gaudy wing in the back. It had this this real awesome looking big wide mouth grille in the front. It had a 1 year only body kit, and it still had that 6G72 that was twin turbo and all-wheel drive, but it had a 6-speed transmission, and I love it. It was Caracas red. And what I love about that car is that if you have a Caracas red 3000 GT, you'll know that it doesn't have a clear coat. It's just a single stage paint, which is good and bad because if you take it to a buffers, they're just gonna, there's a real risk of them buffing through the entire paint down to the primer if they really don't know what they're doing. So the good thing about that is that the clear coat in that era was really poor, and every single car that was left out in the sun will have cracking clear coat except for this car. So this car could be buffed to a very good shine, and you can also repaint it with basically a spray can, which is what I did on some of my panels, and it came out great. It came out looking great. You can buff it back and it looks just like factory. So I miss that car a lot. I sold it a while back, and I sold it basically to fund my house because I needed a down payment, and that really helped with the down payment. But right now I'm just getting that itch, and I saw one on eBay for like 14 grand, which is more than I wanted to spend. But I think that, I don't know, maybe in the near future I'd love to do a build on one of those and just have it around. But before I get all teary on you about my emotions for this car, I've seen the prices go up for mint examples, and let's say the later models, the 98 and 99. The 98s, by the way, are actually more rare than the 99s, but the fact that 98 had the same body kit as a 97 means that you'll have more cars looking like the 97s and 98s than the 99s. Let's say you get a 98 or 99. I've seen them go for anywhere between 25 and 35 grand in really good condition. I've seen basket cases go for less than 10, and you know, anywhere in between there for a decent quality example. You can tell that it's a car that was designed in the late 80s because a lot of the stuff isn't made for the 21st century. The fact that you don't have a lot of space, there's not a lot of headroom, even though the car is quite big, but the engine is very responsive. I do like the turbo whistle. I do like the fact that you can get a decent amount of power. They are basically a poor man's GTR, but right now, if you get a really good example, it's basically half the cost of a GTR. So that is a car to look out for, and I wouldn't be surprised if that car started going up, not as much as like a Supra or NSX, but towards that same trajectory. So yeah, that's a car to look out for. If you can find a late model one in good condition, that's been taken care of by its owner and has good quality parts on it and hasn't been ragged, then yeah, I would just pick it up, and it's a lot of fun in any case. So let's answer some questions. This first question comes to us from Twitter by Justin Hughes. He says, Kirk, Picard, Cisco, or Janeway? Huh? I think I'd choose Picard because he went crazy and killed all the X-Men, but maybe Cisco because what, you know, Thong Song was good back in the day. Our next question comes to us from This Is E on Twitter, and they ask, do you have anything against Doug DeMuro? No, I don't have anything against Doug DeMuro. Doug's a friend, and he has been killing it lately on YouTube, and I recently saw an interview with How I Became, I think that's the channel, and he has basically like an hour-long interview with that guy, and there's a lot of really good insight if you're into YouTube and you're into making content. Doug is a very hardworking guy, and Doug is a really genuine guy. So the content that you see on his channel, where he's basically, you know, geeking out over the stuff, like that's what he is. That's what he usually does, and that's his character, and that's why it works so well for him. So no, I have nothing against Doug DeMuro. He's a really good guy. I would love to have lunch with him. I'd love to make a video with him, but he's crazy busy. So yeah, I mean, hopefully I can buy another car off him at some point, or who knows, maybe he'll buy a car off me, or drive the Aston now that I made it a little better than when he gave it to me. But in any case, Doug is a really awesome dude, and if you're not subscribed to his channel, go do it now. Our next question on Twitter comes to us from Jose G. He says, would you ever work on a muscle car? Yeah, of course. Why wouldn't I? I mean, muscle cars, here's the thing about muscle cars, though. I'm not too big of a muscle car guy, just because I think that it's a bit, the technology isn't there. It's like, it's almost to the point where it's acceptable for me as, you know, kind of a really good all-around car, but there's a lot of compromise that you have with a muscle car. So if we're talking about muscle cars, we're talking about older muscle cars, not like Pontiac GTO. We're talking about something like a 69 Mustang, or, you know, a Camaro or something like that. Usually a body on frame, and even though I think the Mustang was unibody, it's something like a body on frame where you didn't have a lot of structural rigidity. You didn't have a lot of really good suspension components. You just had whatever they had back then to mass market to the public. And people made it work, and they put a lot of power into it, and they went on quarter-mile runs, but they were never really good handlers. And even when you put really good suspension on it, they get basically spanked by anything new, unless you put like $100,000 worth in suspension and R&D and stuff. But I don't think that I would go for that type of build anyway. But a muscle car would be great to do. I'd love to work on something that's carbureted. It would make things a lot easier, even though I don't really know what I'm doing with carburation. So yeah, I would definitely work on a muscle car. I just don't know which one. I don't really have any of them calling to me, but you know, who knows? Tastes change, and I might find something that I just have to have. But if you guys have any suggestions, then yeah, let me know, because I'd love to get into a muscle car and make sure. I mean, I wouldn't want to get into a multi-year project. Maybe something like Roadkill, where I can just fix it up, drive it, have some fun, and then maybe let it go, or just have it turn into something else. But yeah, just let me know if you have any suggestions for me as far as muscle cars. Our next question comes to us from Matt Pluge, okay, on Twitter, and he asks, are there any front-wheel drive cars that you find desirable besides a Hyundai Elantra, of course? Well, yeah, actually, I think that there are a few front-wheel drive cars that would be desirable to me. I think the Acura Integra Type S, that is a really good car for not a lot of money. And it's 200 horsepower, naturally aspirated, 4-cylinder, and the interior looks really good. I like where everything is situated. It's very Civic Type R-esque, but I used to have a EP3, 2003 to 2005 Civic, and I liked it, but it made a lot of noise and didn't really go anywhere. But the Integra Type S makes a lot of noise and actually goes somewhere. It's actually decently quick, and the fact that you can have them with LSDs, and they can handle really well, and it has a relatively short wheelbase, and it's also decently comfortable, and it looks really good. I think that is a really good, desirable car. Not a lot of money, again, but it's something that I would probably get into. And also, I think I'm going to be in the minority here, but a Honda CRZ. So the CRZ is something I would get, and I would probably put a K20 or K24 in it, and I think that would be a really, really good car to have, because they were available with manuals. And even though I'd rip out all the hybrid drive stuff, because that sort of made the car anemic and not very good to drive, so I think that's how I'd make it into the sporty little hot hatch that it should have been from the start. Our next question comes to us from Sean Patrick Doherty on Facebook. He says, do you plan on taking any of your builds to the track to do autocross or something similar? Yeah, I'd love to do that. I think the MR2 is a prime candidate for that kind of stuff, just because it is sort of a basket case, and it is in a really bad shape. And I can turn that into a race car relatively quickly. So I think that is going to be the point of that build. But I've always loved to do autocross. I always love to do quarter mile. I have taken my SL55s to the quarter mile, and I'd love to do more stuff in the quarter mile, especially for cars that are built for that sort of stuff. But autocross and maybe a circuit racing track, they do have a lot of those in Florida, and I think that I'll be getting more and more into that as time goes on. So yeah, look out for that. Next question comes to us from Fabio Higa on Facebook. He says, is it a pain to do oil changes in all of your cars? That's basically like saying, is it a pain to feed all your kids? Well, sure, but it's just, it's part and parcel of owning these cars. And it's not like I'm driving them that frequently that the oil needs to be changed that frequently anyway. Oil can last quite a long time. I mean, it's not going to last forever, but you don't need to be changing it out every 3 months in any case. If I put 1,000 miles on a car, then it's, you know, oil changes can go between 6 months and a year, depending on how hard you drive it. And yeah, I mean, I don't do oil changes that often, but when I do, They need it. It's not that bad. It really isn't that bad. Just get, especially with the lift, I just have a oil catch can, and oil changes take 10, 20 minutes. So, I can basically knock out all my cars in a Sunday afternoon. So that's pretty easy. Our next question comes to us, actually the last question from Facebook, comes to us from Noah Picard Simon. And Noah says, what do you plan on doing with a silver elephant? And the silver elephant is Hoovie's Garage's, or Tyler Hoover's, Mercedes-Benz S600 that I just bought from him. So what I plan on doing it is nothing. That's going to be my daily driver. And the only thing I really want to do is maybe do some mods to the entertainment system. I want to add some Bluetooth connectivity because I know that 07s didn't have Bluetooth streaming, even though the S-Class is, it's up there in terms of technology and stuff. Didn't have Bluetooth streaming, so that's a little bit odd. But yeah, I'm going to do that. And as far as aesthetic mods, maybe an S65 body kit and maybe some wheels and maybe some exhaust tips, because I know that Hoovie had the exhaust, basically the resonator is taken out, so it makes a little bit of noise, but it still is quiet. And I think that's what I want to retain. I want to retain that quietness. I want to retain some sort of semblance of luxury, and it's going to be just a really good daily driver for me. It's not going to be a full build or anything. I'm just going to do a few episodes on it, but nothing major. So that is it. I hope you guys liked it, and yeah, this was a lot of fun. So if you'd like to contact me for any reason, you want to ask me a question, and I'll answer it on a next episode of Ask Me Anything or Sunday AMA or whatever the hell I'm calling it nowadays, then you can reach me at The Real Tavarish. That is Instagram and Twitter. Facebook.com/AskTavarish and AskTavarish@gmail.com is my email, and I'm easy to reach. You can also see me on Wheelwell, all my cars, all my builds, build logs, all that stuff. You can DM me and ask me questions about those there, and I'm pretty sure I'll get to you in a reasonable amount of time. I'm not going to get to you right away, just because it is kind of a lot of stuff to juggle around, and I do get a lot of messages. But be warned that I do read everything. So even the really weird stuff, you guys know who you are. But until next time, this is me telling you that yeah, this has been a lot of fun, and I'll see you guys next time.